The Minnesota Vikings fall to the Baltimore Ravens 34-31 in an overtime loss on an away game, moving to 3-5 on the season and staying at second in the division after the Chicago Bears also lost this week to the Pittsburgh Steelers on Monday Night Football. The Vikings will stay second in the division at 3-5. So, again, Vikings losing another game where they had a lead going into the halftime. A two-score lead going into the half. Minnesota Vikings decided to blow another big-time loss, shooting themselves in the foot with penalties and poor play calling. We see the same thing every week. And we're back on this podcast. Vikings score in the first drive. Look great in the second drive in this game. In fact, they look great in the entire first half. Come out with the second half with a big-time touchdown, a return touchdown. Blow the lead, go into overtime, somehow make it a close game when you have a 2 or 3 score lead in the third quarter. This happens every week. And then losing in overtime. I mean, it's every week we see the Minnesota Vikings have these same penalties ruining our season and just Clint Kubiak and Mike Zimmer being awful coaches. And we're going to recap this once again. Minnesota Vikings. Baltimore Ravens start off with the ball in this game, and the Vikings defense comes up huge. I mean, Vikings defense did have a pretty good game. They came up big. They should have got a fumble on Lamar Jackson, but of course, DJ Wanham had the horse collar tackle. But again, they just hold him to a field goal. Minnesota Vikings get the ball, and once again, in the opening drive for the Minnesota Vikings, look great. They scored in just 7 plays with a 50-yard touchdown bomb to Justin Jefferson on Anthony Everett. This is what I was saying the Vikings had to do. And this is what Clint Kubiak did. This is what Mike Zimmer did in the first drive of the game, taking those deep shots downfield because you are going up against one of the worst pass defenses in football. You don't have to work on establishing the run. You have to take shots downfield, which the Vikings did in the first drive. And the second drive, where they got a 93-yard drive in just 13 plays, giving Kirk Cousins a rushing touchdown. His only rushing touchdown he's going to get this season because every season he gets one rushing touchdown. Great. First 2 drives, Vikings get a touchdown. Why? Because we should be getting these rapid touchdowns every single drive the Vikings have because we are that stacked of an offense. You look at our stat sheet right now. There's no holes on our offense. In fact, our offensive line is surprising me with how great they've been playing. Christian Darrisaw has only allowed 4 pressures so far in his 3 starts and only 1 sack allowed on over 100 and some snaps he's played so far this season. And the rest of the offensive line is doing great. I mean, Oli Udoh, people give him too much credit. Okay, we put Oli Udoh aside because he has 9 penalties so far this season. Yes, people will say he hasn't allowed a sack so far this season, and great, he hasn't allowed a sack. But the only reason why he hasn't is because he always holds on to his guy, and that's why he has 9 penalties in just 8 games for the Vikings. And then Garrett Bradbury also. But as a whole, the Vikings offensive line is doing better than we expected. We didn't have high expectations for our offensive line. What we did have high expectations for was our offense as a whole. Dalvin Cook, Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, not even KJ Osborne, but now KJ Osborne, Kirk Cousins, obviously. The money that you're paying these offensive players and the amount of stacked players you have on offense, the amount of playmakers that you have, you should be getting these big time drives that the Vikings had in the first 2 drives of the game. 93 yards for a touchdown, a 50-yard touchdown pass to Justin Jefferson. I mean, the first quarter, you felt good. It felt good because they tricked me again. Clint Kubiak and Mike Zimmer, once again, for the 3rd straight week, tricked me. I thought they fixed it. I thought, oh, did they finally realize what the problem was? Did they finally realize that they were the problem? And realizing you're going up against a terrible pass defense, maybe try taking more deep shots down the field, which they did in the first 2 drives of the game. 2 big-time penalties, though, however, kept the Ravens in the game in the first quarter. That would be, or the first half. That would be obviously the horse collar tackle that I talked about, and then also the pass interference Xavier Woods had on Rashad Bateman, which set him up for a touchdown. And then going into the second half, Vikings had the ball to start the second half. They were already up 17-10. Kene Nwanu with a 98-yard kickoff return touchdown, extending the Vikings lead to 24-10. First Vikings kickoff return touchdown since 2016 by Cordero Patterson. So in the second half, Minnesota Vikings, Clint Kubiak reminded us how awful of an offensive play caller that he is, calling some of the worst plays I've seen ever. And it just continues time and time again where you see these tight end checkdowns, you see these fullback flats, these running back screens on 3rd and long. When you have 2 excellent wideouts, 3 excellent wideouts now, and you're just targeting, okay, Justin Jefferson, 3 receptions in this game. 3 receptions going up against one of the worst secondaries in football. And I would be fine with Justin Jefferson only getting 3 receptions because, like I said in my preview, I said he's going up against Marlon Humphrey. Like, it's okay if you only give him a few targets this game. But what you shouldn't do is give him a few targets and then your other receivers as well. Adam Thielen only had 2 receptions in this game for 6 yards. KJ Osborne had 1 reception. They combined for 6 receptions total. Clint Kubiak just wasn't targeting his receivers against one of the worst secondaries in football, or one of the worst pass defenses in football. I guess as of right now, due to injuries, they are one of the worst. Going into the season, they were a lot better, but as a whole, with the injuries, this is what you have to be doing, taking those deep shots downfield, targeting Anthony Everett, one of the worst corners in football. This is what the Vikings offense had to continue to do in the second half, and they chose not to. Why? Because they were up by 1 score and decided to just run the clock, continuing to run the clock and punt on every 4th down, instant 3 and outs. That's why Baltimore Ravens just controlled the time of possession in this game, was because the Vikings, I don't get the whole theory about when you're up in the 3rd quarter to just run the clock. It's the 3rd quarter. I don't care if you're up by 1 score, 2 scores, or 10 scores. You have to continue to extend your lead. Has Clint Kubiak watched a game of football after 1980? Same goes for Mike Zimmer. I mean, when it's in the 3rd quarter, you have to continue to rack up those points because this happens. This happens. It happened against the Detroit Lions. It happened against the Carolina Panthers. It's happened now against the Baltimore Ravens. 3 games that came down to the last second because the Minnesota Vikings, Clint Kubiak, and Mike Zimmer continue to bail the other team out. You might burn a minute off the clock. Who cares? All right, you're punting it to the other team and they're just going to respond with some points. And this is what happened where the Vikings, no Vikings fan going into the second half saw that lead, or even into the 3rd quarter after the kickoff return touchdown. Vikings were up 24-10. Nobody thought the Vikings had this in the bag. It just can't happen. It can't happen with the coaching staff that we have. And it just comes to show how important it is to have a good offensive-minded head coach in the NFL in 2021, how important it is to have an offensive-minded head coach that can really work with your quarterback and have a play caller who knows how to call plays that have been developed in the last 20 years. Not these 1980 plays where you just run the clock and continue to do this in the 3rd quarter up by 1 score. Even if you're in the 4th quarter up by 1 or 2 scores, you have to continue to extend your lead because this is 2021, not 1980, where teams continue to pass and teams can score in 3 plays. Vikings scored in 7 plays in the first drive. This is what teams can be able to do, and this is what the Vikings have to do if they want to continue to turn this, if they want to try to turn the season around, which at this point in the season is not likely. It just can't happen. I mean, Vikings best case scenario, 7th seed in the playoffs. Who cares? I mean, Vikings get a 7th seed in the playoff. They're going to be going on the road against the Rams, going on the road against the Packers. I mean, these are teams you don't want to play on the road. Actually, I'd be fine with playing the Packers on the road. I'd be totally fine with that because if we play the Packers on the road and it's in January where it's snowing, I mean, that's totally fine with us because we can just run the rock through Dalvin Cook, which we did against the Packers in Lambeau Field last year, and that worked. So, and then high winds as well. I mean, they just won't be able to take deep shots to Devontae Adams against our defense. I would be okay with playing the Packers on the road. But putting that aside, we can play teams on the road. I mean, we'll have to play teams on the road if we're in a 7th seed. Vikings cannot compete for a Super Bowl in that case. So Vikings, best case scenario, is a 7th seed in the playoffs. But again, we cannot make a Super Bowl at this point because of 2 reasons. 2 reasons on why the Vikings continue to lose their games: penalties and the coaching staff. You forget that the Vikings had 2 massive penalties in the first half that led to scoring drives by the Baltimore Ravens both times. It was 4th and 3, DJ Wadham horse collar tackle. A deep shot downfield to Rashad Bateman, Xavier Woods pass interference. Baltimore Ravens were able to score on both of those drives, and as a whole, the Vikings defense did an okay job, but when it comes to penalties, just continues to bail out the other team. Now, those penalties did happen in the first half, but as a whole, the Vikings defense did an exceptional job. I mean, we had low expectations. I mean, Patrick Peterson's out. Harrison Smith was out with COVID. We also had Michael Pierce still coming off of that elbow injury. He was out. Danielle Hunter, of course, biggest player in this Vikings defense, missing the rest of the season. I mean, all these players were out, and we didn't have high expectations for this Vikings defense. And Lamar Jackson did rush for over 100 yards and pass for over 100 yards, so he had, I guess you would call it a double-triple. He had those plays, and Lamar Jackson had a great game. But as a whole, Vikings defense did okay. I mean, especially Cam Bynum. Cam Bynum jumped a route and got a first career interception. I believe that was in the first or first half of the game, if I can remember right. Cam Bynum jumped a route on, I think it was Mark Andrews, got an interception, picking off Lamar Jackson, stopping them from having a scoring drive. Anthony Barr got an interception in overtime. Vikings were not able to do anything with that interception, but they did. As a whole, the Vikings young players really came up. I mean, Kenny Willekes also came up with a sack. I mean, Kenny Willekes, I forgot he was with a team for a second there. I mean, obviously with Danielle Hunter out, we saw more of DJ Wanham, we saw more of Everson Griffin, but we also don't have Stephen Weatherly anymore, so they were using these next people up. I guess the next man up on this Vikings defensive line is Kenny Willekes instead of Patrick Jones, which was kind of odd because Kenny Willekes, second-year player out of Michigan State. Michigan State football is doing well in the Big Ten right now. I believe they're are they first in the Big Ten East? Okay, whatever. That's college football. We're talking about the NFL Vikings here. So, but the young guys really stepped up. I mean, Kenny Willekes with his first career sack, Cam Bynum first career interception, Kene Nwanu with his first career run, a 9-yard first career first down, and then also his first career touchdown, which was a return touchdown. Had 2 great returns. And then the Vikings player of the game, undoubtedly, is Kene Nwanu. Kene Nwanu, another rookie for the Vikings, rookie out of Iowa State, another college football team who's doing pretty well right now in the Big Ten. Kene Nwanu had 2 kick returns for 121 return yards and a touchdown. That is a 98 return yard touchdown. That's incredible. And 1 carry for 9 rush yards. That was on a fake punt that the Vikings weren't able to do anything with. They did get a first down, but again, Vikings were not able to score on that drive, so it doesn't really matter. This should be the Vikings special teamer of the week, the NFC special teamer of the week should be Kene Nwanu after he had an excellent game, and I'm so excited what he can do. I said in the preview for the Minnesota Vikings that after the Vikings drafted, this was my favorite draft pick. I just love the idea of taking Kene Nwanu in the 4th round when you have players like Dalvin Cook, players like Alexander Mattison who get injured, to have a next man up. And I wasn't huge on Amir Abdullah as well. I'm saying like, he's an okay back, but as a whole, we can do better. And Kene Nwanu is that better player than Amir Abdullah. And I love to see him on this Vikings team in purple and gold. And this guy can move. I mean, first thing you'll notice with Kene Nwanu when he got the ball and started running with it, this guy's got speed. And look at his mock draftable here. Finished in the 98th percentile amongst running backs from the 2021 draft class. Runs a 4.3 240, which is incredible when he's over 6 feet and 210 pounds. I mean, to run a 4.32 and be able to finish in 80 percentile or above in a lot of the most important categories when it comes to running backs. I mean, our rookie running backs look great with both Kene Nwanu and AJ Rose. Like, this is why I mentioned that the Vikings should have traded away Alexander Mattison to the Titans when Derrick Henry got injured, because these rookie running backs for the Vikings look excellent. And I'm just blown away because Kene Nwanu was my favorite draft pick. I loved how the Vikings decided to get him in the 4th round, and I said this multiple times on the podcast so far. He was my favorite draft pick, so to see him get injured in the preseason, right off the kick return with the Chiefs, it was disappointing, and I was most excited to watch him play, but now he confirmed that he's legit. As both a kick returner and a running back, I love this guy. If he can find the opening in the open field, if you can get him a gap on the offensive line, he's fast right off the gun. I mean, Kene Nwanu, come on. This guy is maybe our best draft pick when you look at, because he was drafted in the 4th round to get a running back like this. And then you also have AJ Rose. I mean, Vikings running back room, it's nice to know that we have some excellent running backs. Obviously, Dalvin Cook being top 3, Alexander Mattison being one of the best backup running backs. On top of that, Kene Nwanu now looking as great as he was, and AJ Rose looking as great as he did in the preseason. Vikings should trade away Alexander Mattison. AJ Rose and Kene Nwanu make a perfect running back duo as well, because Rose might not have the speed that Kene does, or might not have the athleticism when it comes to broad jump, vertical jump, but he's got size. AJ Rose is a bigger back who can power through these guys. I mean, he's stronger, he's bigger than Kene Nwanu, so they would make a very good 1-2 punch. And then you also have Dalvin Cook, obviously. When Dalvin Cook goes injured, I'm saying Kene Nwanu and AJ Rose would also be great 1-2 punches in the backfield. This is maybe my favorite draft pick out of this draft, was drafting Kene Nwanu, and this just proved it. So there's a couple good things to look at here, and that really comes down to our young guys, Cam Bynum, Kene Nwanu, Kenny Willekes, seeing our young guys play. But as a whole, this Vikings team, I mean, it's week after week that we just shoot ourselves in the foot from penalties, and our offensive coaching staff just looks awful. I don't know what Ziggy's doing at this point, because if I was Ziggy 3 weeks ago, I would have fired Mike Zimmer, fired Clint Kubiak, and tried to do some different switches on this coaching staff. So far in this season, I doubt it's going to happen. I mean, if it was going to happen in this season that the Vikings decide to fire Mike Zimmer and move on from Clint Kubiak, it would be when the Vikings are no longer in the hunt, which would be in about a few weeks, and Vikings will be looking to a new head coach. I'm excited to see who the Vikings. We'll be talking more about this as we get closer to when the Vikings should be firing Mike Zimmer. But I'm excited to see who our next head coach can be. Hopefully, it's not going to be a defensive-minded head coach. I'm hoping we can get an offensive play caller who can work with Kirk Cousins to push him to his full ability, which would be as a passer and as a runner as well. So Vikings next week will move to LA to play on the Chargers. That's going to be another tough game. Vikings will be underdogs in that matchup. But once again, it's going to come down to the last second, and we'll be previewing that matchup this Thursday on Morning Kickoff. I hope you all do enjoy.